You still making rookie mistakes, ain't you? You've been messing up your recordings, messing up your mixing. You've been doing this for how long? It's cool. I got you, baby. What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Wavy Wayne from wavywayne.com, and this channel is all about helping you to record and mix better and faster. Today, I'm going to do just that by helping you to avoid not 10, not 20, not 30, but 100 of the top recording and mixing mistakes that I see happening all the time. Now, you already know I work with clients from all over the world. I've been a recording and mixing engineer for over 15 years, so I've seen it all, from home studio mistakes to even the large studio mistakes that people who've been engineering and recording for years are still making. So I've thought about this, and I sat down and came up with a list of literally 100 things that I see people doing wrong in the studio, and here's how you can avoid them. First thing first, man, is recording in a loud environment, okay? You want to make sure that your recording environment doesn't have the air conditioner on, that it ain't babies crying, that it ain't police flying up and down the street outside. You want to find a place that is going to be quiet and conducive to the recording. Next, recording in a reflective room, okay? You might just have a room that is so echoey and untreated. You got to find a way to actually balance that, because all the reflections in the room, when you're talking, if you can hear your echoes and reverbs coming back into the microphone, if you can hear them in your ears, then they're going back into the microphone, into your recordings, and it's going to make your mixes just sound a little bit muddy, a little crappy, okay? So definitely reduce the room reflections as much as possible, all right? One other mistake that I see people making for number 3 is buying gear just for the name. Now, I know as a entry-level engineer, you just beginning to record and mix your own stuff, you want to go with the trusted brands, and that's fine. But as you learn more and more throughout this career, throughout this hobby, whatever it is for you, in this journey of recording yourself, you will learn that it's not just always about the brands, but when you actually learn about the components, you'll be able to find that there are some boutique brands that are using high quality components that can actually get you a more unique sound that everybody else just isn't using. And it's probably going to be even higher quality for a lesser price because it's not attached to one of those super big name brands. Another technique for number 4, another tip, is that y'all are not practicing, man. You have to put the time in. You got to put your 10,000 hours in to really feel appreciated at the level that you want to get to, right? To actually realize the level of creation that you want to do. You have to put that time in. And I see a lot of engineers kind of just jumping from student to professional and not spending that time as an intern, or just spending time practicing and doing free work so that they can get their chops up. So definitely one thing there. Another tip that I have for number 5 is that y'all just not listening before you record. You just get in your mind that you're going to record something, and then you set up a microphone in front of it and hit record. You only want to record something because it sounds good, right? Because it sounds pleasing, because it's what you want to capture. I think about recording like taking a picture. If I'm going to take a picture, before I snap that button, I want to make sure the shot is composited, that the light is just right, that whatever's in the background is just right? That the sun is hitting, and we got all our angles together, and then I'm gonna push that button and take that picture. Think about those old pictures. I know nowadays we got these digital cameras and we can just snap 100 times on our phone or whatever, but think about those olden pictures where you had to pull the string to take the picture, right? How meticulous everything needed to be perfect, because you wouldn't even see this picture for another week after it developed or whatever, okay? So let's have that level of intention before we hit record, and only record sounds that we want to keep and not try to fix them later in the mix, okay? Another tip that I have for y'all for number 6 is don't bring so many people to the studio with you. If they are not helping, if they're not conducive to the song, leave them at home. If they're not vocal producing, music producing, they just there to hang out and and take up space and end up talking and sleeping in the studio, leave them at home. Another tip is for my recording and engineers, and this one even extends for artists. At number 7, is not having a lot of confidence, or having a lack of confidence is what I should say. Having that lack of confidence is going to just hold you back, especially as an artist. If you aren't opening yourself up and presenting yourself over the microphone the way that you want to be felt, the way that you want to be heard and seen, it's just not going to translate that way. Same thing for my engineers. You need to have that confidence that you are in control of the session and that you can run it based off of the skills and the practice that you've already put in. Number 8, we have lack of communication with the engineer. So, my number 8 on things list, man, right at the top, you'll notice that some of the most important things here are not necessarily technical things, but just being able to communicate and talk with your engineer as an artist, or if you're the artist, being able to talk with the engineer. But you have to have communication with whoever you're working with in the studio. Number 9 is clipping, digital clipping. You need to avoid clipping at all costs. I see so many people making the mistake of recording too loud and just reaching digital clipping, and there's no way to go back from that. So I would honestly prefer you to record too quiet than too loud. But on number 10, my tip for that is don't record too quietly either. Okay. It just doesn't serve the music to not record loud enough. Your plugins and processors that you're going to be using operate at a optimal level. So they have a certain level, you're usually around -6 dB on average, right? So if that level incoming is less than that, then the plugins and processors that you're using won't be working at their full potential either. So number 12 is going to be for my mixers out here. Don't rely on limiters for your mix loudness, okay? You need to be building up loudness in stages by using saturation, by using parallel processing. You need to be building up that loudness during the mix and not waiting until the end of the mix to rely on slapping a limiter on there to get it as loud as you want it to be. Next on my list at number 13 is going to be over compressing. Now, the compressor is probably one of the most misunderstood tools in all of recording and mixing, and probably one of the most overused tools as well. But over compression will really kill your tracks. When you get that pumping sound on a track and it just sounds like, you're sucking the life out of it, you killed it. You killed the dynamics. It's over. Okay. So don't over compress. Number 14 is that y'all be using way too many plugins. Okay. I've seen people max out all 10 plugins on a track and then route that track to an aux input just to get more plugins. You really shouldn't need that much processing on a particular track. If you need that much processing, you might need to consider the source, maybe re-recording that part or changing the instrument if it's working with a beat or something like that. All right. Next thing on number 15 is that you have to label your tracks. Not labeling your tracks is going to lead to chaos and disorganization, which brings me to number 16 is that you have to be organized in your session and with the files. So not just organized inside the session by labeling the tracks and labeling your audio files, but outside the session. Make sure that you have a hierarchy of folders for where you're saving your Pro Tools sessions or your Logic sessions or Cubase sessions, whatever it is. Make sure that you're saving stuff appropriately because, man, this is your art. These are your babies. You don't want to have to go looking for them and can't find them. Number 17 is actually getting distracted. So we got so many distractions in our world today, so many distractions from our phones to people coming at your door, people walking in the room while you recorded. You have to try to find ways to eliminate distractions at all costs. All right. So whatever that means, if that means putting your phone on D&D, locking the doors, closing the blinds, all that. Do that to eliminate those distractions. That's going to help you to stay focused and get the best out of what you are doing, whether that's recording or mixing or even songwriting. At number 18, man, this is a huge mistake I see people doing, and is not using headphones while you're recording. Yeah, I know to a lot of us that might sound like that simple, and we know that already, but there are literally people out here recording right now who don't know to use headphones while you're recording, and they will actually just be blasting out of the studio monitors while they recording with the microphone, and then we're getting all kind of feedback happening into the microphone and into our recordings, and it just makes it really, really hard to get a clean mix that way when you do that. So make sure you are using headphones, closed back, isolating headphones, kind of like the Wavy One Studio headphones. Number 19 is that you have to buy a mic that fits your voice. Don't just buy a mic that doesn't suit your voice. This kind of goes back to one of my earlier tips for we just buying gear for the name. Specifically, you need to make sure that you try microphones out when you can to make sure that they actually give you the qualities that you want to hear in your voice. What a good microphone that sounds good on my voice may not be the best for your voice or your client's voice. And don't just rely on using that one microphone to think that it's going to be an end all be all. You have to have multiple choices while you're working. Next up is that you guys have to use the right type of mic for your recording situation. Now, this can span way beyond vocal microphones. If you're going to be recording a drum set, or you're recording strings, or you're recording a room sound or a choir, right? Or you're recording a car driving by, whatever your recording situation is, you want to make sure that you choose the right type of microphone for it. Do some research. Does this does this type of application work best with dynamic microphones? Do I need a condenser microphone, a ribbon microphone? Does my cardioid pattern need to be figure 8? Does it need to be omni? Right? My mic pattern, does it need to be cardioid, right? So these are things that you need to figure out and make sure that you're choosing the right type of microphone for the job that you're going to be doing. Make sure that you are using proper microphone placement. Placing the microphone too close to a corner of a wall will cause reflections that easily get right back into your microphone. Also, if you are placing a microphone up on the source, do you want to be really close to the source or far away from the source? Again, that goes all into listening before you hit record, and maybe even moving the microphone around until you hear exactly the sweet spot in your recording scenario on where that mic should be placed. And then that's when you hit record. Number 22, too much EQ. Okay. I see this a lot. I hear it a lot, I should say. We are spending so much time on the EQ, changing what we've recorded or changing the sounds that we've used. If you have to do so much extreme EQing, you might need to go back to recording and make sure you're capturing what it actually is that you want to include in your song, or go back to the production phase and say, okay, I've had to do too much sculpting to this particular sound. I should have probably chosen a different, better sound. Okay, so when you start EQing and start making things sound really unnatural, especially organic instruments and voices, over EQing can really kill that intimate feeling. So we don't want to over EQ stuff. We rather replace it or redo it if we need to add too much EQ to it. Number 23 is gonna be that y'all are using some weak samples in the music, man. A lot of times, the sounds that I get for working on a mix, they just sound like that Fisher Price Casio stuff, man. That is really remedial sounding. As producers, some of y'all have great melodies and great rhythms with your drums, but if you kill all that and use a sound that's just remedial, a sound that just don't sound good, it's not modern, it's not big enough, then that's really gonna kill the production right away. Number 24 is going to be a huge problem that a lot of beginning engineers run into, and that's going to be that y'all are recording with latency. Now, what's latency? Latency is the time that it takes for you to speak into the microphone, for your audio interface and DAW to process that audio from analog to digital, and then spit it back out from digital back to analog, and then you hear it in your headphones. There's a time gap from you saying something into a microphone and then hearing it back from your computer, and that time is called latency. The more processing that you add in the way during that process, the longer the latency will be. So you want to minimize the latency by removing latency heavy plugins. Like if you got some brands of auto tune and pitch correction, those can be very heavy. Even some compressors and other processors can be very heavy on the latency, but also learning how to properly set your hardware buffer size low when you are recording and then setting it back high for when you are mixing will help to reduce the latency, so that the timing of your performance is going to be more accurate and more enjoyable for your artist or client that you might be working with. Stop relying on presets, man. Y'all are just leaning on the presets so heavy. It feels like you're not even trying sometimes to be innovative and come up with fresh ideas. You slap a preset on and think it's going to be a set it and forget it. Yes, presets can be a great starting point. They can also be great to learn certain processing techniques, but every sound and every source is unique and it needs to be treated as such. Number 26 is overusing pitch correction. All right. Now, when you get way too much tony uni, it started sounding a little silly. So try to make your singer sing the part over again if it's not working. Don't just rely on the pitch correction. We just want to be in this microwave age where it's like we record the thing one time and think that the auto tune is going to save us. No, make sure you're sparing that pitch correction and use it appropriately and lightly if possible. Number 27 is going to be having a fix it in the mix mentality. I'm so heavy on this. I want y'all to remember these words is that you want to mix before you ever hit record, okay? Be mixing before you be recording. Now, what does that mean? Again, you're just listening to the source. You're listening to what's coming through those speakers. There is a button in Pro Tools, got the little eye on it, little green dot. You click that eye, that's called input monitoring. Now you click that before you hit the record arm, okay? This way you just able to listen to what it is, and it needs to sound like how you want it to sound damn near on the finished product, okay? So don't wait till you get done with the mix or like, oh, we just gonna record this. I got all these EQs and stuff. I'm gonna transform it. No, let's make sure that the source that we're capturing is what we want to keep. 28, drowning everything in reverb, okay? Stop using too much reverb, period. Number 29, improper routing. And with this, I mean, y'all are using sends and returns wrong. You're using buses and groups wrong. Make sure that when you are using reverb and other time-based effects like delays and choruses, that you're setting them up as a send and return. That's going to be the best way to get the full effect, okay? You know, I got videos on how to set up reverbs and delays on my channel. So for more in-depth on that, go watch one of those videos. Number 30, the tip number 30 is going to be that y'all are using compression instead of using the fader, right? Instead of using level adjustment. Everything don't need to be compressed. Some stuff can just be turned up by using clip gain or using your fader, or you can turn it down. Even using automation is a great replacement for using compression, where compression can make your signals sound processed and unnatural. You can start getting that pumping sound. You won't have to worry about any of that when you are using volume automation or even clip gain based level adjustments, okay? So definitely before compression, maybe you want to try clip gaining and making sure you're doing some volume automation before compression. Understand your tools is going to come in at 31. Just knowing what everything does, and you can do this by studying, yes, but getting the practice and getting the hands-on, taking an official course like my Pro Tools certification course will definitely help you out. There's a lot of courses out here, a lot of videos on YouTube, but the more you know about your tools, the better that you'll be able to mix. If that includes like when you get something new, actually cracking open and reading that manual so that you can know about how to use that tool, okay? At number 32, another mistake that I see is that y'all be editing without using fades and just having really crappy edits altogether. Be careful when you're editing. For one, the whole point of a fade is to prevent the clicks and pops when you're going from clip to clip. Anytime that you make an edit or cut a clip, you should be adding a fade at the beginning and the end of that clip, right? It's called tops and tails. And as professional audio engineers, that we know that we want to top and tail every single one of our clips in our sessions just to prevent any clicks and pops as the song is playing along. Also, with the bad editing, y'all be cutting stuff a little bit too close. Make sure you zoom in. You're not editing this little tiny thing. You zoom in and you edit right up on the waveform as you can see it, okay? Next up at number 33 is mixing without proper low-end response. Now, how you gonna get that 808 to be slapping if you don't have a subwoofer, right? How you gonna know whether you are really got that kick jumping if you listening on a tiny little boombox, all right? there has to be a balance. Yes, small speaker systems can tell us a lot about our mixes, especially around the low mid frequency range. But if we really want to dial in the sub low frequencies and that bottom end of our mixes, we need to be listening on systems that can support that low end frequencies. Okay, so make sure that you have a subwoofer or two in your setup when possible, and that you are actually monitoring those low frequencies. Next up at number 34 is going to be mixing on improper monitors. Yes, I see some of y'all mixing on monitors or speakers, I should say, that were not designed for monitoring at the studio level. Like, for example, let's say we got the Beats by Dre headphones. Some people actually record and use those to mix while they mixing a song is some Dre headphones. Now, those headphones have an EQ curve that enhances certain frequencies of the music. If you're using that to mix out of, then your music could be limp, or it could be overhyped in certain areas because the actual curve of the headphones or your listening device is changing that. So make sure that you have as flat as possible frequency responses on your monitors, okay? As flat as possible. Next up at number 35, man, one big mistake that I see people making, especially when you are just starting out, is trying to self-master your songs. Stop trying to master your songs yourself. You just learned how to record, you barely learning how to mix it, and now you are already trying to attempt to master your songs yourself. That's crazy, B. There's people who would have spent their whole life dedicated to this, and they are mastering engineers. There's definitely something that they have to offer there. And if anything else, even if it's one of your buddies who says, you know what, I master a few songs, having a second set of ears over your music can sometimes be very helpful, especially if it's someone that you trust and they have the experience to lead you in the right direction. Next up at number 36 is recording at too low of a bit depth. When you record at too low of a bit depth, you just don't get the proper headroom. So we want to, you don't get the proper dynamic range. So we want to make sure that we are able to have our mixes be very dynamic. So don't record at 16-bit if you have the option to record at 24-bit or even 32-bit floating point nowadays, which I definitely recommend that y'all do. Next up is going to be using too low or too high of a sample rate. Mainly too high of a sample rate. Now, 44.1 kilohertz is most of the time where that's the base. Most interfaces won't go beyond that, and that's actually okay to record at 44.1. I prefer recording at 48 kilohertz, but if you want to do 44.1, that's fine. It has a flavor and texture of its own. But definitely there's no reason to record at extremely high sample rates. There's no reason for me to be recording my next rap song at 192 kilohertz. That's just that's pointless. Okay. All it's going to do is take up more space on my drive than necessary, and it's not going to give me any better results. So no need to do that. Next up at number 38, one tip is to stop rushing, y'all. Stop rushing the recording process. Take stuff over, take it again, record it again. Take your time with setting up the mics. Experiment with different types of microphones. Experiment with different microphone placement. Experiment with different takes and different styles of delivery, and just stop rushing the process. So next up is to make sure that y'all instruments are in tune. All right, now this is tip number 39. You have to make sure that you tune the guitars, tune the drums, tune your bass, whatever instrument that you're going to be recording. If it's some type of woodwind instrument, make sure they're using the right reed, right? This is all that stuff. Again, mixing before we hit record. Don't try to fix it in the mix. Make sure that we're capturing something that is quality, capturing something that is worth being recorded. Next up at number 40, this from my mix engineers when I was writing this one, is that y'all are lacking on taking notes during the mix. During the mixing process, you should be taking notes, writing down things that you want to change, writing down what you want to hear, writing down what your plan or strategy is, and then going into the mix and knocking out those big key ideas. Don't just go in freestyling the mix. You actually need to go in and you'll finish a lot faster and start to create a system for how you mix once you start to actually think about it in a more methodical way and take notes before you start the mixing process. Next up at number 41 is that y'all be mixing for way too long. Your ears only have certain amount of time before they get tired. Your brain is gonna get tired. You're gonna be tired of mixing and all that. So take breaks, take frequent breaks. Don't just mix for too long, especially if you're mixing at too high a volume. Okay. My tip that's coming in at number 42 is that you should be using a reference mix. Okay. Now, whether that's the rough mix that the artist or the producer had already gave you, or you just referencing another song that's similar in quality, you can realize your mixes sound a whole lot faster when you actually compare it to a reference and you're being truthful about what you're hearing and the differences about what you want to achieve, and what you actually hear in your own mix. Next up at number 43, I'm leaning heavy on my mix engineers, and this is making everything be heard, man. Now, I used to have this problem when I was a young mixer. I was coming up, man. I used to think that if the producer put it in the mix, if he put it in there in the session, then it needs to be heard. And I need to find a way to make sure that we can distinguish every single little element of the production. Sometimes stuff is just layers. Sometimes stuff just needs to be there and be felt and not be heard. So don't think that you need to find a special place for every single element, especially with a condensed, saturated mix. Next up at number 44, this tip is going to be to stop ignoring phase issues. Make sure that you're checking phase correlation between like sounds, especially those low end sounds, or a lot of phase issues can start to present themselves. Number 45 is that y'all are not using a click track, man. Use a click track, please. If you are not recording to something that is rhythmic, that has a constant beat, you're gonna need to have a click track when you land your beat down for the first time, or even if the beat, let's say you did have something that was a beat, but then all of a sudden that beat dropped off into a piano melody for 4 to 8 bars. You need to be able to switch gears and jump off into using a click track to still keep your timing. Then you get rid of that click track and it'll be like you was rapping on beat the whole time. All right. Next up at number 46 is that y'all taking too many takes, recording too many takes. All right. Now, as a producer, there should be somebody, either the artist is producing, or you got the engineer producing, or you have an actual producer there, but somebody needs to know exactly what the vision is for the final output of those tracks. And once we have it, we need to stop taking the takes, right? Don't just be having your artist record 10 times the same part because you don't know what you're looking for. That's going to tire them out, tire their vocal cords out. The whole experience is just going to be dragged out, all right? So don't record too many takes. Next up at number 47, I know I just said don't record too many takes, but number 47, I'm going to tell y'all to be recording doubles. Certain stuff does need to be doubled. And I don't want y'all to make the mistake of actually doubling the track inside of your DAW. Now, when I say doubles, I mean you record it once, then you record it again, and record it again if you need to. And by doing that, with all those 3 or 4 different recordings stacked up together, they create a nice wall of sound. Now, if I just take one recording and then duplicate that same recording, it's not going to do anything but reinforce the loudness on that recording and possibly start giving me phase issues, especially if I start changing them and panning them out to different ways. So keep that in mind. Don't do the double up where you just duplicating the tracks. If you need doubles, actually record those doubles. Next up, number 48 is that sometimes y'all are placing the microphone way too close to the source, especially when you're doing vocals. Now, when you get a microphone too close, we get this low end pickup. That's called the proximity effect, right? So the closer you get to the microphone, the more, the louder the low end frequencies will be picked up. So we don't want that proximity effect. Let's avoid that and stay a safe distance away from the microphone. So that would be like maybe 8 to 12 inches. All right. Next up at number 49 is that you got to stop recording with those cheap and broken cables. Yes, if your cables are cheap and they're not shielded well, they could be subject to picking up interference. Now, this is rare. A lot of cables nowadays are pretty good, but there are some cables that may have issues. And if you realize that, hey, maybe this issue is coming from this cable, get a higher quality cable or make your own to make sure that it's shielded from possible interference. And also, like, you know, if the solder points are weak, then, you know, any little movement in that cable could cause a noise or something like that, and you just don't want to have to deal with that. Next up at number 50 is gonna be bad singing. Oh my God. Okay. Get a vocal coach. If before you start recording, get a vocal coach. Don't have the mix engineer spending hours trying to melodyne your poor performance. Get a vocal coach. Practice your singing. Practice hitting those notes, and it's gonna make the recording come out so much better. It's gonna make the mixing come out better. Because man, unless you got it like that, it's gonna take a lot of hours of meticulous piece by piecing your recording together, or you could just, you know, practice those vocals and deliver a great performance. All right. Cool. All right, y'all. So, you know, I just can't go at the singers without going at the rappers. So, coming in at number 51 is bad rapping, man. If you offbeat, you trying to pull a blue face on us or whatever it is that you think you calling it, get your raps together. Make sure you got your cadence tight and you got some bars, because we can't have a good song or a good recording or a good mix if we don't have a good rap performance either. So, that's going to be the next tip for y'all to stay away from. Coming in at number 52 on my list of 100 things to stay away from while you're recording and mixing, 100 mistakes to avoid, is going to be bad timing. Now, using a click track is definitely going to help you with your timing when necessary, but you just have to make sure that you're listening to the music. Maybe if you need to tap your feet or something, but practicing your rhythm, practicing that delivery. And if you need to actually get in and edit after, so this is for my recording engineers, if you need to actually edit that performance to make it more in time and make that timing more congruent, whether that's quantizing or literally manually moving items around to put them more closer on the grid, you need to do that. Number 53 on my list of mistakes to avoid is going to be leaving your cell phone on, man. It ain't nothing worse than you performing the best take of your life, of your hip hop career, and then you get a phone call right in the middle of it, and then you got to do it over, right? Bet you that phone call wasn't even important, but this time that you spent in the studio making your creations, right? That vibe that you were delivering, you really can't recreate moments. So take the time out to put the phone away, turn it off, put it on D&D while you are in the studio. Number 54 on the top mistakes to avoid is not facing the mic. Imagine setting up the mic perfectly, getting the levels just right, and then I just go and do one of these. Or better yet, I'm rapping off my phone lyrics, so I'm doing one of these, and then, or I'm doing one of these, or off to the side, right? You see, you hear how that actually changes the projection of my voice. So make sure that you are facing the microphone and you're delivering directly into the microphone. So that may require you to memorize your lyrics, or just make sure that you're giving the proper mic position if you are reading the lyrics. Number 56 is for my artists, my engineers, and my producers. All of y'all need to take breaks. You need to take ear breaks. You need to take vocal breaks. You need to step away from the music so that you can come back with a fresh perspective. Hammering away at the same song for 12 hours, super focused in, sometimes it's just going to lead you down a dark path that you just don't want to be in. You spend a few hours working on that song, but then you step back and look at it from a wider view, right? You get a different perspective and come back at it with a fresh and renewed energy, and that's how you're going to really kill it. The next mistake to stay away from is not being professional. So this is number 57 on my top 100 mistakes list, is just not being professional. What does that mean? That means showing up late. That means, you know, you as an engineer trying to slide and act like you the producer and you playing beats for artists when you shouldn't be playing them. You know, all kind of things. You know what professionalism is. Treat your studio work as a business, no matter if it is a home studio. You want to be professional with yourself so that you can get professional results and take the time to do the meticulous things that you need to produce the outcome that you want. This for my artists. Number 58 is stop letting the engineer change your plan. Don't let the engineer change your plans. Yes, it's good to get input and have advice from the engineer, but you are the artist. You should come in with an idea of how you want the finished product to sound, what you want that finished product to be. And just because an engineer has been doing this for years or whatever, don't let them just influence what it is that you came to create. You're there to have the engineer facilitate the recording for you. All right. Remember that. Next up, number 59, back another tip for my audio engineers, my mixing and recording engineers is please stop mixing in solo so much. It's fine to occasionally hit that solo button and check out what one sound sounds like by itself and fine tune it. But you do that for a very brief period. You want to put it back into the mix as soon as possible and check things in context. It doesn't really matter so much how things sound when they're soloed versus how they sound when they're working with all of the other elements of your mix. So spend less time working with that solo button and more time working with everything in context to one another. Number 60 on my top 100 list of mistakes that you guys are making in your recording studios is forgetting about stereo width, right? Now, I see this on a lot of newbie recording engineers and mixing engineers is that they are neglecting the pan knob, all right? That pan knob is your friend. We have 2 speakers or even more with all of the immersive audio that we have going on now. So panning is super, super important. Don't forget and don't neglect to get creative with your panning and pan stuff away from that center channel, all right? Next up, number 61 on my top 100 list of mistakes for recording and mixing is going to be killing the dynamic range. Now, this is definitely a big tip for the mixing engineers. You don't want to squash the dynamic range of your mix. Now, how would you do that? By adding too much compression, by putting too much limiter over your mix bus. You want to make sure that your mix is alive and flowing where everything is not the same level. You have certain elements that are super loud in the mix, and then you also have more elements that are soft and subtle, right? This can also be the job of the composer, the producer, when you putting together these tracks to make sure that you are including these high and low energy areas. Number 62 on my list of the top 100 mistakes that audio engineers and artists make in the studio is not checking your mixes on different monitoring systems, right? You got the one monitoring system and then you spending all day in that room that may even be flawed and you're not even bothering to check your mixes on multiple systems. Yes, at the very least, you want to be checking on one pair of headphones and a pair of studio monitors. That's at the least. But think about all of the mediums where your music is going to be played and think about how many bases you can cover in that way. Number 63 on my list is going to be not leaving enough headroom, okay? You need to make sure that you have headroom while you're mixing. Now, what does that mean? That means that you got 0 dB. That's the point of digital clipping. If any of your sounds exceed that 0 dB mark, then it's going to be clipping and it's going to distort. So when you're mixing, make sure that you're watching your meters and that you are leaving enough headroom so that you know, for as you start to add sounds and add more processing and then do your mix bus processing and then whatever mastering is going to happen to that song, you need to make sure that you have enough headroom for all of that. Number 64 on the list is not using a high pass filter. Definitely a tip for my mixing engineers. You need to use high pass filters whenever it's necessary, right? Listen to those elements of your mix. If certain instruments and vocals have unnecessary low end rumble, like for example, vocals always, right? Just in case you want to use a high pass filter and roll off the super low frequencies that aren't needed. And a lot of other instruments may have unnecessary low end that could just bother and mess up your whole mix. So make sure you're cleaning up the low frequency areas by using a high pass filter. Next on the list, number 65 is not using a low pass filter, right? Just on the opposite edge of that, some instruments are going to have too much high frequency energy that we're going to want to attenuate. So definitely make sure that you're using a low pass filter also whenever necessary. Number 66 is on my list is that you guys are EQing the master bus to fix the mix. Oh my God, right? don't think about putting stuff on your mix bus to enhance the mix. If you have to go and spend time EQing heavily on your mix bus, on your master channel, on whatever you call it, your two bus channel, if you have to spend time putting EQ over that whole mix, right, to fix elements, you need to go back and find what's the problem in that mix that I could fix before affecting this, right? That should be a very last stage, a last draw kind of thing. If that is getting too extreme, you definitely need to go and fix stuff in your mix before you do any EQing on the master bus. Okay. Number 67 on this list of things to avoid is not using automation, y'all. Okay, automation is going to be your best friend while you're mixing. You can use automation, volume automation, pan automation. You can even automate all the parameters within a plugin. This is going to help to make your mixes move so much more to where instead of even using compression on certain parts of the mix, you could automate the level of that vocal. It will work a whole lot better than using compression. So think automation to get movement in your mix before sometimes even reaching for some effects, right? I know a lot of times people will use like the auto pan plug-in and stuff like that when you could really just do this yourself and probably make it even more custom and fluid how you like it just by doing it manually through automation in your DAW. Next on my list, number 68, is doing the same things too much, right? Now, what do I mean? Are y'all doing the same things too much? That means that every single mix you approach with the same mentality and you just start doing stuff because you are like trained and it's ingrained in you to do certain things. So you're being more proactive when you're mixing instead of being reactive, right? Make sure you're listening to what's coming out the speakers and then reacting to that with the best knowledge that you have instead of just being proactive and attacking the music, attacking the mix before you even are giving it a good chance to listen to it and see what it needs from you. Number 69 on my list is going to be for you to stop trying to turn a sound into something it's not, okay? Now, what does this mean? That means you're using too much EQ, using too many effects, too many filters and shape shifters and stuff. Pick a different sound, choose a different sound. Stop trying to turn the sound into something that's not when it's in the mix. If it's just not working, you can replace it, right? Replace the samples, replace the vocalist, replace that snare. Stop trying to turn stuff into something it's not. Number 70 on my list of these mistakes that y'all need to avoid is stop relying on those fix-it plugins, right? Those RX plugins. I know someone that told me that that's one of the first things they do on every single mix is lean to the RX and clean up the recordings. Why do you have to clean up the recordings on every single session? You don't, okay? Stay away from that. Don't rely on that. Those are very last measures. They degrade the quality of audio. Yes, they are great tools to have when you absolutely need them, but you know, don't lean on a declipper. Just don't clip, right? Don't lean on a background noise remover plugin. Just make sure you remove the noise before you start recording, all right? Number 71 is not being clear on what it is that you want to achieve. When you go to a studio and you go to work with a client, you go to work with an artist, right? This goes for everybody. For the engineer, what do you want to achieve? Producer, what do you want to achieve? Artist, what do you want to achieve during this session? You have to have clear goals. Otherwise, you're just out here freestyling, and that could really waste a lot of time and money in the studio. Number 72 is not paying attention to your gain staging. Please do your research on gain staging, learn gain staging, make sure that you are properly paying attention to your meters throughout the whole recording and mixing and mastering process. Super important, okay? Number 73 is going to be stop making vocals so thin. Do not make your vocals thin. I talked about using a high pass filter a little bit ago, but some of y'all are doing it way too much high pass on the vocals. It just makes them so thin and they're piercing through the mix. You want to keep some of that body in. So yes, you don't want super lows on your vocals, but you don't want to cut them all out either. Find a nice balance while you're using that high pass filter and rolling off low end frequencies on your vocals. Don't make your vocals too boomy. Yeah, number 74 right behind that is don't make your vocals too boomy. You get the picture, man. You have to find a balance. Everything in mixing here is about finding balance. Number 75 on my list is gonna be bad beat selection, man. Some of y'all just be picking crappy beats. Artists, come on now, get the beat game together. Just because that's your cousin, you know that beat is not that fire, okay? We need to actually go ahead and get some high quality beats. If that means you got to go to BeatStars or whatever, download you some beats, work with a producer, make your own beats, whatever it is. Stop laying on them weak beats, man. All right, y'all, coming in at number 76 on my 100 things to avoid in your recording and mixes is going to be too much boosting instead of cutting, okay? Remember that when you're boosting frequencies with an EQ, you're actually increasing the gain of that signal. So start off by doing subtractive work first. If the signal seems like it needs to be brighter, try reducing the low end, and that will give the perception that it's brighter, and vice versa. All right. So think about cutting before boosting. Number 77 on my list is just not knowing your room, not knowing if your room is giving you too much bass response, not knowing if there are frequency buildups in that room or even phase issues in your room. Know your room, listen to music in your room through the monitors, through your mixing situation, and understand where the problem areas are, understand where the sweet spot is so that you can produce your best music. Number 78 is going to be not knowing your monitors. All right. That goes right along with not knowing your room. You really need to spend time just listening to music through the monitors that you're planning to mix on. Like, so a good practice is when you're coming in, just getting set up for your day before you start your session, play some popular songs, play some of your favorite music through those monitors in that room so that you can familiarize yourself with the environment that you're going to be working in. Number 79 is just mixing mindlessly. Now, what do I mean by that? That means you're just not thinking. You are literally just clicking away, moving stuff, doing stuff, just not even having a real plan and mixing mindlessly. Okay. Again, you want to bring out a tablet or something, right? Get you a piece of paper, take notes, and have a plan of action while you're actually mixing that song. Number 80 on this list is going to be not knowing when to stop. Now, this is something that a lot of people struggle with. And for me, the stopping point is going to be simple, right? It's going to be, when can I actually listen to this song from start to finish and forget that I'm working on it and actually just become a consumer for a few minutes, right? Now, when you're able to do that, or when you hit the deadline, it's time to stop. Number 81 on this list is not being reactive. If you are being too proactive with the mix, you are missing moments and opportunities to let the music speak to you, to let the instrument speak to you and tell you exactly it is what they need from you. They want to ask for compression when they want compression. It's going to ask to be brightened up when it needs to be brightened up. React to what's coming out of those speakers a little more. Number 82 is just going to be having a lack of energy in your mix, having a lack of oomph and chest in that mix, right? When you're mixing, bring that energy by using saturation tools, by using parallel compression, by keeping the mix dynamic and not squashing stuff. And then also having moments of excitement, little effects here and there that just tickle your ear and re-energize and re-engage the listener. Number 83 on this list is going to be too many low-end sounds. Yeah, we talked about using high pass filters on stuff because if it doesn't need that low frequencies, it's gonna muddy up your low end so much. Your 808s won't have definition, your kicks won't have definition. So if you have too many low end sounds in the composition, start off by reducing those out of the composition first, right? Like, just get rid of them, mute them, delete those tracks if you have that liberty to do that. And whenever you need to, also use filters. All right. Lack of clarity, right? So number 84 on this list is just going to be a lack of clarity in your mixes. You know, not enough high end, not enough definition on those vocals, on those things that need to actually shine through the mix. Your mix is a little dull, and so the clarity isn't coming through. So, you know, don't go too heavy with the low pass filters. Don't go too hard with the de-essers. We want to make sure that we keep some of that high end sheen for that clarity on our mix. Next up, 85 is looking for a mastered sound. Something to avoid for sure is looking for a mastered sound while you're mixing. If you're chasing that mastered sound, you're going to be neglecting the nuances in the music as you're actually mixing it. So don't worry about comparing yourself to a mastered record. Don't worry about chasing a mastered sound. focus on the mix. Don't think too much about, is my mix too loud? Worry about, I mean, is it going to be loud and competing, right? Think about dynamics. That's what's going to matter the most when you get to that mastering stage, is making sure that your mix is nice and dynamic. The next mistake to avoid is not using groups. You can accomplish a lot and get a lot done more quickly and more efficiently in your mix by grouping tracks together, grouping plugins together, and working with groups of tracks all at one time. Next up is not going to be properly using buses, right? So 87 on my list is not using buses properly. Buses in your DAW are the pathway to get from one track to the other. They can be used for setting up parallel processing, for adding time-based effects. They could be used for even grouping and subgrouping your tracks and routing everything through a aux input, whatever it is, however you work doing the workflow. Try to find the best use of buses in your workflow. Number 88 is that y'all ain't using enough shortcuts. You just not an editing ninja. You know, you got to be ticking away a whole lot faster, right? So become an editing ninja, learn your shortcuts in whatever DAW that it is, Pro Tools. Learn your shortcuts so that you can work a lot faster and more efficiently. Number 89 on this list is just not understanding how inserts are processed. In most DAWs, you're going to realize that inserts, right, when you're applying those effects processors, they're going to be processed in a certain order. In these DAWs, they're processed in series from top to bottom or from first to last, meaning that the insert before affects the one that comes after. So if I put an EQ first, then that signal will be EQ'd going into my compressor. That compress and that EQ'd and compressed signal will then go into whatever effect I have next. Number 90 on my list is not EQing your reverb, man. If you got a loosey-goosey reverb, man, and this just got too much high end and too much low end, you really can't tame that thing down. So one thing that you definitely should avoid in a mix and is not EQing that reverb. Really scope that reverb sound and make it exactly what you want it to be and make it fit into that mix, and really all of your time-based effects. Number 91 on the list actually is not getting creative enough with your effects. You can get more creative with the effects. Add an EQ to the reverb, add flanger to the delay tracks, right? Add a chorus to that delay, or add a reverb to the delay, whatever it is, right? You can compound effects and get a whole lot more creative, maybe even distortion on some of the delays, right? Number 92 on my list is going to be that you're not setting the tempo right. Make sure that your tempo is locked into your session. This is just going to help you a whole lot with editing a lot quicker. And whenever you're applying those time-based effects, you can use the session's tempo to automatically make sure that your effects are in time with this session. Next up, 93 on my list is that you just can't put reverb on everything. So avoid that. Avoid putting reverb on everything. If you have a drum set, for example, typically most of the time you can get away with only putting reverb over the snare, and it'll give the illusion that the whole drum set is covered in reverb. You don't need to put reverb on every single element in your mix, on every vocal, because that's just going to create a wash, okay? Number 94 on my list is processing everything. Again, you need to be reactive when you're mixing. Every single track probably doesn't need to have a plug-in on it. Maybe some tracks just need you to change the fader level and put it in the right position. Every track does not need to have plugins. Every track doesn't need to be EQ'd. Every track does not need to be compressed. You don't have to process every single thing in your session. Number 95 is that you sometimes are going too heavy on the high pass filters, leaving your mix overall very thin. So I know that we keep stressing this, that you want to take off some of the low frequencies whenever possible, whenever it's not needed, but be very careful with that. Don't take off too much, because if you go too heavy, your whole mix will sound disjointed and it won't have the glue, right? That low mid area is really the glue that glues a lot of the stuff in our mixes together. And if you're missing those frequencies, it just does not gel together so well. Next up on our list is going to be not using parallel compression. Now, you know, one of my favorite techniques to getting more oomph out of a certain signal, getting more presence out of a signal, whether that's a vocal or a drums or even bass, right? If I want to get more presence and more girth out of that signal, parallel compression, upward compression, New York compression, all of those different terms relate to the same thing, but yes, do it in your sessions. Number 97 on my list is a huge one that you're definitely gonna regret if you don't do it, and that's gonna be not saving. You know, if you don't save early and save often, you will be sorry. Command S always, Control S if you on a PC. Yes, you need to do it. All right. Next up on my list, number 98 is not reading the manuals. How you think you're gonna know how to actually properly operate the equipment, properly operate these plugins that you're getting if you've never even glanced at the manual? Yes, you can get a lot done with the guesswork, but you can get a whole lot more done if you know the full operation and how things behind the scenes are working in the plugin so that you can better make decisions when choosing those processors. Number 99, one of the biggest mistakes that y'all need to avoid is not using Wavy 1 isolating headphones. Yeah, I mean it, right? The headphones that I have, the Wavy 1 studio headphones, as seen here, as available on wavywayne.com. They attenuate 33.4 dB of sound from escaping the headphones, meaning that you won't have a lot of music bleeding off into your microphone. And also, they're really good for my engineers and artists who are recording in the same room. You put the Wavy 1 isolating headphones on, and you can hear what's being recorded, what's coming out of the DAW versus hearing what's happening in the room, right? Passive isolation, no batteries required. Go to wavywayne.com right now and copy one of those. I mean, two of those or a few of those. All right. Number 100 on my list is that you don't have an engineering community to lean on, man. So that's a huge mistake, is that you don't have a mentor. You don't have any guidance. You're sitting here watching YouTube videos, and I'm your mentor, right? But I can only take you so far through this video, and I really want to help you and guide you a whole lot further, which is why I created a community called the Wavy Seals Elite. The Wavy Seals Elite guides engineers just like you to the next level in their career by offering mix critiques, exclusive master classes, practice mixing, right? Recording and mixing techniques, right? No matter what DAW you are in, the Wavy Seals Elite will definitely help you to get to the next step in your journey. Text ELITE right now to 314-400-2880 to join the only community that's helping audio engineers get to the next step. I'm Wavy Wayne from wavywayne.com. I hope you enjoyed these 100 mistakes to avoid while recording and mixing. I'll see y'all back next time. Let me know if I forgot any. I'm sure I left off about 1,000 more. Y'all be dope.